Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
They say every family has a golden child and a black sheep, and in ours, there was never any confusion about who was who. My name is Amanda. I'm 41 years old, and for as long as I've been breathing, my younger brother Danny has been the sun in our parents' solar system. He was born 3 years after me with blue eyes so bright they made old women in church cry, and from that moment on, he could do no wrong. He could crash his bike into a parked car and get praised for being adventurous. I could get straight A's and still be told I needed to smile more, try harder, stop being so sensitive. Christmas always had this glossy, fake joy layered over years of resentment and unwelcome memories, and I used to think it was just me being dramatic. But this year was different. This year, they took it too far. This year, they handed my brother the keys to a brand new condo like it was just another stocking stuffer. They did it in front of me like I was just a guest who happened to show up. Like I hadn't spent 41 years trying to be seen. It started the same way it always does. The smell of cinnamon rolls my mother bought frozen and pretended she baked from scratch. Dad in his thick maroon cardigan, even though the heater was blasting like a furnace, and Danny arriving 15 minutes late because he had to stop for gas, which somehow no one ever holds against him. My mother greeted him with the kind of hug you usually reserve for soldiers returning from war, and my dad clapped him on the back so hard the ornaments on the tree rattled. I stood near the fireplace, holding a mug of coffee I didn't really want, smiling politely like someone on a bad date, watching them all fawn over him. Danny handed out gifts, grinning like a game show host, his perfect teeth flashing like white flags of surrender. "For Mom," he said, handing over a neatly wrapped scarf set. "For Dad," he said, passing along a bottle of Glenlivet with a smug little wink. "And for my amazing big sister," he said, and handed me a thin package that turned out to be a self-help book titled Finding Joy in the Journey. It took everything in me not to laugh right there. Joy in the journey? The journey of being ignored, belittled, dismissed for 4 decades? The journey of swallowing what happened to me just to keep this family intact? The journey of staying silent so he could keep being the hero? Then came the big surprise. My dad stood up, cleared his throat in that dramatic way he does when he wants to make a moment feel more important than it is. "Danny," he said, "your mother and I have been thinking a lot about your future. You've worked so hard this year, and we're so proud of the man you've become. So we decided, well, here." He pulled a small black box out of his sweater pocket, opened it, and held up a single silver key on a red ribbon. My mom was already tearing up, dabbing her eyes with the sleeve of her holiday sweater. "It's yours," she whispered, like they were giving him a kidney. "We bought you a condo." A condo. Not a weekend trip. Not a used car. Not a promise of inheritance years down the line. A full-blown, modern condo in a nice part of town with a view of the river and walking distance to his job. Danny looked stunned for a second, like he'd rehearsed being surprised, but forgot his lines. Then he stood up, hugged them both, said all the right things. "I can't believe this," he said, but he could. Of course he could. No one looked at me. Not a single person turned to see my face. Not a single person considered that maybe, just maybe, this might hurt a little. I watched them all cry happy tears and pose for pictures, arms around each other like this was a damn Hallmark movie and not the latest chapter in the saga of Amanda Doesn't Matter. So I waited. I smiled. I said, "Wow, and that's incredible, and you deserve it, because I've learned how to blend in when I need to." I let them finish their little ceremony of self-congratulation. I let them finish their cocoa and their reminiscing and their worship of Saint Daniel the Magnificent. Then, when it was quiet again, when the ribbon had been tucked away, and my mom had disappeared into the kitchen, and Danny had finally stopped talking about square footage and natural light, I reached into the inside pocket of my coat, pulled out a plain white envelope, and walked over to my father. "Merry Christmas, Dad," I said. He smiled at me for the first time that morning. "Oh, you didn't have to get me anything, honey." I didn't say a word. I just handed it to him. He opened it slowly, probably expecting a card with a sentimental message, maybe a photo of me as a kid pasted inside with some handwritten note about memories. But instead, he pulled out a folded sheet of standard printer paper. The air in the room shifted the moment he looked at the first line. I watched the color drain from his face like someone had flipped off the power to his brain. His smile disappeared completely. Not slowly, not with hesitation. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Like a mask dropped on the floor, he stared at the paper. My mother had returned from the kitchen and asked, "What is it?" But he didn't answer. He just kept staring, jaw clenched, that vein near his temple starting to pulse. Danny leaned over and squinted at the sheet. "What's that?" he asked, casual and clueless as ever. My father folded the page once, twice, 3 times, placed it back inside the envelope and whispered, "You wouldn't dare." But I already had. The thing about a moment like that, the way his smile disappeared as fast as it came, the way his fingers tightened around the paper like it might somehow reassemble itself, if he squeezed hard enough, it doesn't just happen in an instant. Even if it looks like it does. That kind of moment has roots, layers, echoes of things you've buried so deep you forget how heavy they've become. That folded sheet, the one he just read the first line of, didn't come from nowhere. I didn't write it on a whim, in some fit of spite or rage. No, I've been writing that letter my whole life, piece by piece, line by line, through every year they spent pretending not to see me. It started last March, after my last conversation with Mom about what happened when I was 17. You know the one, where she says, "We've all made mistakes, Amanda," like my trauma was just a traffic ticket or a missed appointment. Where she sighs and tilts her head like she's trying to comfort me, even as she's invalidating everything I survived. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my hands clenched into fists under the covers, thinking, what if I stopped playing along? What if I stopped protecting them? So I started writing. At first, it was just notes, memories, pieces of a puzzle that no one in my family had ever wanted to solve. I wrote about the night it happened, what he said, what I felt, how the room smelled like stale bourbon and lemon-scented floor cleaner. I wrote about the time I told Mom, and how her face crumpled, not with sorrow, but with inconvenience. I detailed every time she asked me not to bring it up again, because it would just stir the pot or confuse your brother. I dug through old diaries I swore I'd thrown out. I found pictures that didn't show what happened, but showed the silence that followed. That silence had weight. It had color. It had the shape of betrayal. But writing wasn't enough. Not this time. By May, I found a therapist. Not the gentle, breathing exercise type either. I found one who was sharp, no nonsense. The kind of woman who stared you down until you told her the damn truth. She didn't blink when I told her everything. Instead, she leaned back and said, "Amanda, you're not crazy. You're conditioned." That sentence was the first gift I gave myself in years. It unlocked something in me. By July, I had a lawyer. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I didn't walk in there asking how to sue my parents or burn their lives down. I walked in with a stack of notes and one single question. If I told the truth, what could they do to me? And the answer? Not much. Turns out, there's a lot you can say when it's the truth. There's even more you can write when it's documented. I didn't write the letter to punish anyone. I wrote it because I was tired of pretending my pain didn't count just because it made people uncomfortable. I wrote it because Danny's brand new condo was just the latest trophy in a lifelong game I was never allowed to play. I wrote it because I didn't want to carry it anymore. Let him carry it for a change. Let Dad feel the weight of what he did. Let Mom realize what it cost me to stay silent for this long. Now, back in that room, with the fireplace crackling and the scent of cinnamon rolls still hanging in the air like a bad joke, my father held that truth in his hands for the very first time. He'd held a lot of things over the years, tools, contracts, expensive whiskey bottles, and my childhood, but he'd never held the truth before. Not like this. "It's funny," I said, sipping my now cold coffee. They spent almost $25,000 on that condo. Or maybe it was 50. I always mix those up. He didn't laugh. No one did. My mother was staring at him like she wanted him to say something, anything, that would make it all okay. Danny, bless his deluded little heart, still hadn't realized what was happening. He kept glancing between the two of them like he was watching a show in a language he couldn't understand. My father's jaw moved like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Just that one phrase, eventually slow and deliberate, "You wouldn't dare." But here's the thing about threats, they don't work on people who've already lost everything. And here's the other thing, I already had. I lost their trust when I told the truth at 17. I lost their protection when they refused to believe me. I lost my place in this family the moment they decided Danny's comfort was worth more than my voice. So no, Dad. I wouldn't dare. I already did. There are memories that cling to your bones so tightly that even your blood tries to forget them, and no matter how much time passes, no matter how many years stack up like dusty boxes in the attic of your mind, those memories wait patiently for their chance to surface. People think trauma fades like a bruise or peels off like old paint, but what they don't understand is that some nights stay with you forever, and sometimes silence is not healing, it's survival. I was 17 years old when my life split in two, when the truth started digging its way under my skin and never stopped scratching at the surface. What they didn't know, or maybe what they didn't want to know, was that the man who stood at the head of our dinner table every Sunday, the man who kissed my mother's cheek with mechanical precision, the man who bragged about Danny's baseball trophies and rolled his eyes at my moody art phase, was not just absent. He was a goddamn predator. It happened during one of those all-too-frequent weekends when my mother went to visit her sister in Ohio, leaving me and my father alone in the house like that wasn't a recipe for disaster. She always said, "You're old enough to handle yourselves," as if feeding the dog and locking the doors was the biggest danger we faced. That Friday night started the same as any other. He made frozen pizza and poured himself a whiskey, then turned on some documentary about war, something loud and grim that echoed down the hallway while I sat on my bed pretending to study. The air was heavy with something I didn't recognize at the time, but later understood was dread, the kind that crawls up your neck without warning and settles like frost across your skin. I remember hearing his footsteps before I saw him. Not fast, not loud, just steady. Too steady. I remember the way the doorknob turned slowly, deliberately, like he was waiting to see if I'd stop him. I didn't. I couldn't. When the door creaked open and he leaned against the frame, eyes glassy and mouth tight, I knew something was wrong. I don't remember exactly what he said, some garbage about how I'd grown up, how I wasn't a little girl anymore, but I remember how his voice sounded. Like someone trying to sound kind while carrying a knife behind their back. The next part, well, I don't describe it in detail anymore. Not because I'm afraid to, but because I shouldn't have to. Let's just say he crossed a line no father ever should. He touched what was never his to touch, and in doing so, he carved a scar across my soul that not even time had the decency to dull. When it was over, he left without looking back, as if he hadn't just destroyed the last bit of safety I'd ever known. The next morning, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't pack a bag and run away. I made coffee. I fed the dog. I waited for Mom to get home. And when she did, I told her the truth. I told her everything, from the footsteps to the door to the touch. I watched her face change as the words spilled out, hoping, just hoping, she'd pull me close, maybe cry with me, maybe say something that proved I wasn't alone. But she didn't do any of that. Instead, she got quiet. She walked to the kitchen. She poured herself some tea. Then she came back, sat across from me, and said the one sentence that broke me worse than anything he ever did. "Amanda," she said, "don't lie about something like that." At first, I thought I hadn't spoken clearly enough. I repeated myself, slower this time, more careful, as if choosing the right words might make the truth more palatable. But her face didn't change. If anything, it hardened. Her eyes narrowed, not with concern, but with suspicion. She folded her arms and said, "Do you know what you're accusing him of?" Yes, I knew. I had lived it. "You're going to destroy this family," she added, as if the family hadn't already been poisoned from within. Then, as if it were the most logical solution in the world, she said, "You need to apologize. We'll chalk it up to a misunderstanding." And that's exactly what she made me do. She called him into the living room, sat me on the couch like a misbehaving child, and I was forced to say I had overreacted. I watched my father's lips twitch into a smirk, just for a second, just long enough for me to see it and for her to pretend she hadn't. She nodded, satisfied, and later that night, she made meatloaf like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just swallowed glass to protect a man who should have never been allowed to call himself a father. That was the day I stopped being a daughter. That was the day I realized I was never going to be protected, not by the woman who birthed me or the man who broke me. That was the day I became my own damn parent. So when I handed my father that folded sheet of paper on Christmas morning, what he didn't realize at first was that it wasn't just a confession of pain or a plea for acknowledgement. It wasn't a letter asking for forgiveness or understanding or even justice in the traditional sense. That paper was a formal accusation. It was the documented truth of what he did and what she covered up. It was names, dates, details, corroboration, and a notarized statement that said, "I am not afraid anymore." Because what they didn't know, what they refused to believe, was that every year I stayed silent, every birthday I smiled through clenched teeth, every Christmas I watched them love my brother like he was some kind of gift from God while I sat in the corner choking on their lies. I was getting stronger. And now it was their turn to choke. The thing about burning down a house, metaphorically or otherwise, is that people don't start screaming when they see the flames, they scream when they realize it's too late to stop them. That's the exact moment we were standing in, the part where the smoke thickens, the walls start to groan, and everyone's too stunned to run. My mother's hands trembled as she held the envelope again, like it might still turn back into a Christmas card if she just stared hard enough. My father sat stiffly in the corner chair like a man waiting for a judge to read a verdict he already knew by heart. And Danny, God help him, paced in front of the tree with his arms flailing, like he was trying to swat away a swarm of hornets that weren't there. "You're ruining everything," my mother hissed, her voice tight and sharp, not with disbelief anymore, but with blame that curled like frost along the edge of every syllable. "After all we've done for you, Amanda, after all we've held together." I nearly laughed then, not because it was funny, but because the words were so completely detached from reality that they landed like a slap to the face. All they'd done for me? Held what together, exactly? A glass house built on the bones of my silence? What exactly, I asked her, tilting my head, have you held together? The family? The story? The illusion? My voice wasn't raised. I didn't need to shout anymore. I had already taken the oxygen out of the room. "You need to take this back," she said, stepping toward me with that same tight, urgent panic she used to use when Danny scraped his knee or she forgot to defrost the turkey. "Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him you made a mistake. We can talk this through as a family, like adults." But I wasn't interested in adult conversations that started with gaslighting and ended in denial. Not this time. "I didn't make a mistake," I said, slowly and clearly. "But you did, Mom. You made it the second you looked me in the eye at 17 and called me a liar. You made it again when you let him walk away untouched. And you're still making it right now." That's when Danny finally exploded, his face flushed and voice rising like a toddler being denied his favorite toy. "You're just jealous," he spat, with all the wisdom of a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. "You've always been jealous of me. You were never happy unless you were causing drama." I turned to him, more tired than angry now. Jealous of what, Danny? The condo? The fake attention? The empty praise? I stepped forward, handing him the second sheet of paper I had kept tucked behind the first one. "You want proof? Check the timestamps." He blinked at the page like it was written in code. "What the hell is this?" "A timeline," I answered. "With dates." places, people, everything I remember. And more importantly, everything others remember, too. That was the part they hadn't expected. They thought I was alone. They always believed that as long as no one else could confirm my truth, it could stay buried. But they underestimated how many people had seen things they didn't understand back then, how many family friends, school counselors, and old neighbors I had quietly contacted in the past year. Not everyone had the full picture, but piece by piece, they helped me rebuild it. You talk to people? My mother's voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since childhood. You went outside this family? There was never a family to begin with, I replied coldly. Just a cover story with matching pajamas and bad casseroles. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she just collapsed into the nearest armchair like someone had unplugged her from the wall. The kind of silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was nuclear. No more shouting. No more defense. Just the slow dawning horror that I hadn't just broken their little holiday illusion, I had torn down the scaffolding holding their whole reality in place. The fireplace crackled behind us, mocking the quiet with its artificial warmth. Danny finally sat down, shaking his head in disbelief, muttering something under his breath about how this was supposed to be a good day. That's always been his problem. He thinks goodness is something that happens to him, not something he has to earn. And then, without a word, my father stood. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man who had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. He didn't look at me. He didn't speak to anyone. He simply crossed the room, picked up the folded letter from the coffee table, placed it inside his jacket pocket like it was a passport to somewhere darker, and walked out the front door without even bothering to close it behind him. The cold air rushed into the living room like a truth no one could ignore anymore. And for a moment, no one moved. Not my mother, not Danny, not me. The only sound was the wind and the faint hum of some Christmas carol playing on the radio, the kind that suddenly felt nauseatingly out of place. He didn't slam the door. He didn't say goodbye. He just vanished like he had so many times before. But this time, he took the weight of my silence with him. And the house, our perfect little house, finally started to feel hollow. The silence didn't come immediately, but when it did, it settled thick and slow over the days that followed, like dust in a house that no one lives in anymore, like breath held too long in a room where everyone's already walked out. Christmas was over, but the fallout had only just begun. And if anyone had asked me what peace looked like, I might have described exactly this: no phone calls, no texts, no demands for apologies or explanations. Just the quiet hum of a world that finally stopped pretending it didn't hear me. My mother didn't reach out, not even to spin the story her way, not even to fake concern. I guess even she knew that certain things, once spoken aloud, can't be unsaid, can't be painted over with Hallmark cards and dinner invitations. And Danny, well, Danny did what Danny's always done. He posted Instagram photos of his new condo's kitchen island, his view of the river at dusk, a smug little caption about blessings and new beginnings, as if our family hadn't just imploded in real time. I didn't engage. I didn't block him either. I watched silently, sipping my coffee each morning and scrolling through his digital delusions like a stranger watching a reality show they already knew the ending to. He had no idea what that letter really said. He'd never asked. He'd just chosen the version of the story that made him feel safest. Me, the bitter sister, angry about money, lashing out during the holidays. It was easier than facing what the truth really meant about the man he called Dad. But peace, as I came to learn, doesn't always mean closure. Sometimes peace is just the absence of noise, the hollow space that echoes after something inside you has finally snapped. I found myself waking up early, not out of anxiety like before, but out of something closer to calm. I went on walks. I read the books I'd been stacking for years. I cooked actual meals instead of just microwaving whatever was easy. I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Then, 5 days after Christmas, the phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but I picked up anyway, my curiosity stronger than my instinct to avoid more chaos. The voice on the other end was calm, rehearsed, professional in a way that made my skin itch. He introduced himself as a representative from a law firm, my father's law firm. Not mine. He made that very clear. He said he was reaching out to discuss a potential settlement, which sounded more like a threat wrapped in a bow than anything else. I didn't say anything. I let him talk. He said things like non-disclosure agreement, reputational preservation, mutual respect, and my personal favorite, a way to move forward without further disruption to the family. That was when I laughed. Not politely. Not subtly. I laughed the way you laugh when you finally realize the people who claimed to love you never actually saw you as a person, just a liability. A loose end. A mess to be cleaned up quickly before the neighbors notice. I asked him what they were offering, not because I wanted it, but because I wanted to hear the number. He told me. It was a lot. Enough to make someone else go quiet. But not me. Tell him, I said slowly, that the cost of silence is a hell of a lot higher than that. And I'm not interested in selling what I've already paid for with my life. He said he understood, but I could tell he didn't. He said they'd leave the door open in case I changed my mind, and I almost asked him if my father had bothered reading the whole letter yet. If he knew what I had. If he realized that not everything I included was mine alone, that some of it came from other people, other voices, other shadows in this same broken house who'd stayed quiet even longer than I had. But I didn't say any of that. I just hung up, placed the phone gently on the counter, and went back to chopping onions. Because this wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about justice or revenge or finally hearing the words, "I believe you," from people who couldn't even look me in the eye. This was about ownership. Of my past. Of my voice. Of the story that had once been written over without my consent. I never told anyone what the letter actually said. Not in full. Not even to the therapist who helped me draft it. She knew the broad strokes, the timelines, the language we used to ensure it would hold up if ever challenged. But the details, the sharp edges, the raw moments, the lines that bled, I kept those for myself. And that felt right. Because the truth doesn't need to be shouted from rooftops to be real. Sometimes it just needs to exist. Quietly. On paper. Unapologetically. By the time the next Christmas came around, I didn't go home. Not that I was invited. I imagined Danny hosted something picture-perfect in his condo, probably used the same plates Mom gave him last year, and maybe even hung up one of Dad's old golf trophies on the shelf like a sentimental relic. I didn't check his feed. I didn't care. Instead, I stayed home. Alone, but not lonely. I poured myself a glass of red wine, lit a single candle, and played one of those old jazz records I used to hide from them because they always said it was too depressing. I curled up on the couch with my favorite blanket and stared out the window at the falling snow, not looking for anything, just being. This year, I gave myself something. The truth. And I didn't even need to wrap it.